Hello, dear ones. We're going to be joined by Sarah shortly on an episode of Authentic Alchemy tonight. Just waiting for her to join. I hope everyone is having a beautiful evening. Tonight we're going to be talking about radical resilience and perfect timing. Sarah is joining us now. There she is.
I
Oh,
was like, what? I'm like, what's
there
going
she is.
on? Hi.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. Doing well.
It's yeah, it's kind of overcasty over here
Yeah.
today. So it's a I don't know, it's kind of like feels like a moody day on top
Mm-hmm.
of, kind of a moody sort of week. So yeah. So I guess I'm feeling good. And, I'm also feeling, I just think like just a lot of the feelings, emotions, moods that have just been unfolding over this past week. It just feels like there's been a lot. We have been just hit with a lot.
Yeah.
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 So,
It has been.
and right on
Mm-hmm.
trend with our topic today around resilience.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, let's dive in.
Mm-hmm. It can be really challenging to have resilience in these moments when things feel so very dark in the world, when we feel
Hmm.
so inundated with so
Yes.
much pain,
Yes.
and it's hard to make sense of it. I know myself, I've been at this place of just like make it make sense. It's like it doesn't make sense. There is no making sense of it, and so it's
Right.
acceptance of
Right.
what doesn't make sense and what is
Yes.
unspeakable at times, what we just really don't always have human words for, even though we try so
Right.
desperately to find them.
Exactly. Yeah, I've found and have been giving myself permission
Mm-hmm.
um to feel whatever is coming up. And it's I recognize, like I had a friend ask me, like, how are you doing? And even though I definitely felt, just like the emotional weight and gravity
Mm-hmm.
of these tragedies that we've been facing. I was honestly like a little numb. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was honestly like, I recognize that I don't even have the space. There's a part of me that does not even want to give the space in this moment
Mm-hmm.
to sit with, the level of tragedy that this really carries, because
Yeah.
um it's so incredibly um horrific. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's just an honesty of this process of numbing that can
Mm-hmm.
come up,
Yep.
and learning how to be with that, and how to have the courage to to allow yourself to feel versus to go completely numb.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Absolutely.
I feel like it's important to say that because I can imagine that there are people who, are carrying a lot on their plate on top of also dealing with what's going on
Mm-hmm.
in the world around them. And it's such a tool of, self-preservation that it's real.
Yeah.
And it's also what gets in the way oftentimes of what radical resilience is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a barrier to that. So
Yeah.
what I know for sure resilience is about is the courage that it takes to just feel, because it
Mm-hmm.
takes a lot of courage just to be alive and just to deal with life itself and what's going on in the world around us.
Yes.
And what I find radical resilience to be is just the commitment of embracing the courage to show up even
Mm-hmm.
when it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Courage is one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight as part of this, but
awesome.
this idea of the numbing and recognizing that it's a balance of feeling
Hmm.
and going into these states that are numbing in a sense, but also just kind of taking a break from and resting
Yeah,
from. And I
yeah.
think that we've given it a bad connotation at times with the idea of numbing, that it's when it's conscious, when it's a conscious choice, I think it is more about resting and taking breaks for our own sake
Hmm.
and sanity and health. As activists, we need to be able to take care of ourselves in order to continue to be activists in the world and speak up for the people who need our help and our support and help, raise them up as well. So,
Hmm.
taking time out for ourselves and turning off certain emotions or allowing ourselves to have certain boundaries around how and when we're in those emotional states, I think is actually really healthy for us.
Hmm.
Something that I do with clients is allowing them to kind of have a box where we can put things in and where we can put things on a shelf for a little bit of time. Maybe it's a couple of hours, maybe it's a couple of days, knowing that we can come and open that box whenever we have the capacity to do so again. And I
Hmm.
think so much of resilience is about, you know, increasing our capacity and harnessing our capacity to show up more, to accept more, to, hold more truth, to see beyond more illusion, right? To hold
Hmm.
more power. All of these are part of having resiliency. And these moments when we're in really challenging situations, personally or collectively, it allows
Hmm.
us opportunities to find balance in our lives and step into different roles that we might not always be comfortable stepping into, but are very needed in the world right now.
Yeah. Yeah. When it comes to capacity, there's something around trauma and capacity
Mm-hmm.
and um like the hyper vigilance, hyper independence, hyper
Mm-hmm.
awareness, right?
Yeah.
um that creates this idea that you can take things on, and you do take things on, and you
Mm-hmm.
should take things on,
Right.
and you lose sight or touch of what capacity you truly have,
Mm-hmm.
or what it is to really have capacity.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be an interesting thing to talk about right now, is like, what exactly is capacity? Because people mistake capacity as in being able to, handle a lot of things at once, or to
Mm-hmm.
take on, more, or to show up, I want to say, right, or to show up, not looking weak or with strength, or, whatever.
Right.
And all of those are
Mm-hmm.
not really what capacity is
No.
about.
No.
Yeah. So would you say more about this piece around capacity, and then, like, how we can uncover really where we are with our own capacity?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a beautiful question. Capacity is really about like what is our threshold, what we can
Yeah.
like physically, emotionally, mentally kind of carry that's going to keep us still in a healthy, balanced, harmonious state. And I think it's so important that you spoke to this because we live in a patriarchal society, a capitalized society where overproductivity is what has been glorified for so long. And
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
we've pushed ourselves so much, especially women, to the edge of our capacity over and over and over and over and over again.
Hmm.
It's important in these times where there's collective trauma taking place to be aware of our capacity and our sense of responsibility. I think that yes, I personally think we're all obligated to each other, to the earth, to you know, being loving, to being compassionate to each other. But that
Yeah.
also means taking care of ourselves, and not in a selfish
Yeah.
way of thinking that we deserve anything more than anybody else does, but holding on to what we need for our capacity, and recognizing that to take a step back from friends or family or work, even at times, or school, if you're a student in, you know, college, high school, watching this, um, recognizing that we need to pull back sometimes in order to bring ourselves back to our full capacity and fill up our own internal cup, kind of thinking of ourselves as a thermometer. And as we are experiencing more trauma, more stress in our lives, more challenging, overwhelming emotions or situations, our that temperature gauge is going to be higher, which means our capacity is going to start to be lower in you know, the opposites of that. And as our capacity rises, then yes, we do have more ability to handle stress. We get less emotionally attached to stress, and we can be more in our calm inner state, allowing things to happen outside of us and around us without it rocking the waves as much within us. But if we're not taking care of our capacity, that stress is going to rock the waves, and it's going to maybe even drown us at times.
Yeah.
Increasing our capacity is about being able to float in the waves, float in the storms of life, and understand that we will get through those storms, that we will survive these challenges, and we will be better off eventually. Not that that is without pain and discomfort in the meantime.
Mhm. And it's, to that point, Sarah, like it is so much of embracing that resilience requires going through challenges.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Growing
so often,
does.
yeah, it's the growth process. But
Mm-hmm.
I think, Sarah, when we ask to grow, or when we say we want to grow into a better person or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or which is not the correct way to look at that either. But when it
Yeah, but
comes
I
to
understand what
growth,
you're saying.
yeah. But we still carry this idea of, like, can I get, I want to find that strength and that perseverance, and
Mm-hmm.
be able to tap into that grit,
Yes.
um, to be
Grace.
able to
Yes.
handle, the things that are coming,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's actually like, no, that's the alchemy that comes through going through the process.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we get to surrender to the fact that we don't have control, and that takes a
Right.
lot of courage. Like, that's where
Yes.
courage
Enters in.
really has to be walked forward,
Mm-hmm.
because it's embracing the fact that I don't have control here, and
Mm-hmm.
I know that life has its twists and turns, and
Yes.
those twists and turns are going to give me the they're going to help resource you and
Mm-hmm.
resource your system,
Yes.
to be able to be resilient.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting because we talked about this, Sarah, of, like, when it comes to the deepest heartbreaks that we go through, like, those heartbreaks are part of the fire, right? That is
Yes. That we walk
building the
through.
strength
Mm-hmm.
of resilience,
Mm-hmm.
so that you actually can love deeper, so you
Yeah.
can show up in your power, so you
Yes.
can learn how to harness your energy, so you understand what balance is, right?
Yes.
That's
I'm
like the
smiling because you're like,
paradox of it all.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, you're saying all the things I had written down here. I'm like, yep, just keep
Right,
going.
because come on.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's so much about showing up with that grit and trusting in our
Yeah,
ability to know that we will persevere, that we can persist
yeah,
no matter the challenges that are happening, no matter the waves that are crashing over us, no matter that are the people, the teachers that are coming in to teach us lessons that we didn't think that we wanted and needed, but here they are showing up in our lives, right? And I
yeah.
think so much of how we harness our resilience is also remembering that in this unraveling, we also need to be weaving in what we want this new to look like.
Mm.
And so for me,
Mm-hmm.
that is rebelling against some of this chaos in the world by actively choosing joy, actively choosing play, actively choosing laughter, choosing
Yeah.
love more and more and more, opening our hearts more and more, our minds more and
Mhm.
more.
Mhm.
That's where the
Mhm.
courage piece comes in. Instead of, these situations can make us want to hate more and close our hearts off and run away and
Yeah.
isolate and
Yeah.
hide more and more. And
Mhm.
that's the opposite of resilience. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm not shaming anybody who's having that response because it's also very, 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 very natural biologically to do that.
Right.
It's
Right.
protective.
Right. Right.
When we're in a trauma state, we're always going to choose protection. And so there's no shame in
Right.
that, no judgment whatsoever. But
Mhm.
knowing that when we're in active trauma state and we're continuing trauma experiences, we're not
Mhm.
able to be in our empowered state. And so that's the goal, is to be able to help ourselves shift there, right? So that's where that kind of numbing, wounded behavior versus maybe the more empowered expression of that is where we're in a state of rest and allowing that and having the balance be there and knowing when we might be in those activated fear responses and how
Mhm.
we can shift ourselves into the more empowered states. Play and
Mhm.
dance and movement and moving these emotions through our body is such an important
Yeah.
part of that
Yeah.
work. Not
Yeah.
letting the emotions get too stuck within the body.
Mhm.
And you'll
Mhm.
notice in that example I used with clients before, it's like we're putting it in a box. We're putting it in a place that's separate from holding and carrying it within us.
Mhm.
And remembering that these things that are happening in the world, although they are a mirror of the collective, they are not a mirror of us. They are not a representation of what is broken within us.
Mhm.
This is a brokenness that is a part of the world. But we don't have to identify with that brokenness. And we can remember that even in this brokenness and this chaos, we are whole always. We
Right.
are always connected with the divine, and the divine is working. And I'm not saying that the divine is like wanting children to be murdered by any means. That's
No.
human
Right.
interference. That's not
That's
divine
the
at all.
loss.
Right.
That's not even seeing the divine. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the
Hmm.
disconnect from the
That's the
divine. The
blindness.
divine
Right.
is crying out for that person. They're not
Right.
listening, they're not hearing. So I'm
Right.
not in any way suggesting that what happened was divine intervention or anything like that. That
Oh
was human
no.
interference.
Hmm.
That's what happens when we close our hearts, when we are not
Exactly.
allowing men to express emotion. Suppressing emotion is not resilience. Suppressing how we feel is not resilience. It
Hmm.
might be necessary for a certain period of time, but for the long term, that's what causes chronic pain, chronic
Yeah.
loneliness, chronic
Yeah.
isolation, being alone in
Yeah.
our pain, being alone in our suffering.
I find so much of the path towards resilience is and what you're kind of demonstrating here, Sarah, and what you're explaining is like it's it's the it's the awareness of your own patterns and habits,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And choosing differently,
Yes.
choosing a different response,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's in that awareness and it really it takes courage to show up differently.
Mm-hmm.
It does take so much more courage to be heart opened, especially in the midst of something that makes you want to really shut down.
Yeah.
Um, but that has the most impact and transformative effect of recovery, which is really what resilience is about. It's about
Mm-hmm.
recovery. Resilience is
Mm-hmm.
the process of healing,
Mm-hmm.
and we cannot have a conversation about healing and recovery without recognizing like what our part is in
Mm-hmm.
understanding our own pain
Yes.
and walking that process of recovery for ourselves first. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly what you're talking about as far as
Mm-hmm.
the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're talking about the divine, I when I was sitting with resilience and radical resilience, I just realized like you can't like resilience um requires spirituality. Like it requires a connection
Trust.
to, and yeah, like
Hmm.
to something bigger, because exactly, like that's where we build trust, that's where we have faith, that's where we believe that there's something that's powerful unfolding,
Hmm.
that is actually has healing and recovery, like
Yeah.
that's accessible.
Hmm.
It's the minute that we have lost sight of that, right? That
Yes.
we
We feel so
we
alone.
yeah,
Hmm.
it's like that our healing and our recovery becomes so stunted.
Hmm.
um and I think in alignment with just the tragedy um of this mass shooting, and the tragedies of violence period that we are seeing in the world,
Hmm.
just even over Memorial Weekend. I mean, it's been
Yeah.
just really fascinating, is that all of this is because really, like, we're dealing with such a crisis of of our of our connection,
Yeah. Our
right, to
hearts.
our
Hmm.
hearts.
Hmm.
And that disconnect is what is creating and causing so much suffering in the world.
Hmm.
And it's definitely one of those things, Sarah, when it comes to resiliency, learning how to resource yourself,
Hmm.
because um, being in connection with our hearts is really the only way that we are going to be able to move forward
Yeah.
um, towards our shared healing and recovery.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Learning how to trust in ourselves
Mhm.
and move towards what we're feeling and what we're experiencing collectively, looking at it, not shying away from it, not dissociating from what we're seeing happening, but looking at it and really taking the action that we're called to take right now to, I that my voice alone is not very powerful necessarily, although I think I have a very powerful voice. But when we all speak together, when we all stand together, then we're really being heard. We're really able to create change. And I think this is really calling for us collectively to come together to create change. That this is really important for us to do collectively, to move towards love for each other in all the ways that we can, in building our capacity for more love for each other and for
Mhm.
ourselves. And that's one way that we can start is loving ourselves more
Yeah.
and moving more towards trust in the divine and trust in love to guide us, to fiercely love ourselves and those around us and express that love fiercely to each other, building each other up, setting boundaries around people who aren't safe for us to be around, recognizing that that's perfectly okay in order for us to reach the goals that we need to in our life, to be resilient in the way that we need to. It's also protecting ourselves from unnecessary pain and suffering. It's an important
Mhm.
part of resilience is learning and recognizing how to discern the difference between who really
Yeah.
is safe to have in our orbit in our world so that we can be resilient and not constantly be caught up in trying to save or rescue people or fight battles with people who just want to create problems or drama in our lives.
Right. Being able to walk away from those dynamics that aren't, yeah, that are getting in the way.
Right. Deplete our
So
capacity.
yeah, deplete our capacity.
Hmm.
One of the things I've been, sitting with and exploring, especially when it comes to this piece around courage,
Hmm.
um, is that even when, like it's an interesting, I don't know, it feels like maybe it's a dichotomy of like sitting in of this reality of like, um, sometimes things can feel so big and so overwhelming, right?
Hmm.
And it leaves you feeling helpless or in this helpless state, right?
Like a victim mindset.
And like a victim mindset,
Hmm.
right? Um and maybe your capacity is low.
Mhm.
Maybe you really don't have a whole lot to give. And what I find is like in these moments where challenge comes and we're faced with a lot of challenge or
Mhm.
challenging things that are happening and unfolding, um, there's a difference between checking out,
Mhm.
right, and wholeheartedly engaging in a way that extends a sense of empowerment versus helplessness,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
And it's one of the things I've been treading for myself because the fear and the overwhelm and the helplessness that I hear from people, along with everything else that might be going on in your own personal life or in the lives of the people that you love, that you are, a pillar for, or
Mhm.
you have a role, for, of support for. Um, we are still very much connected to everything around us.
Mhm.
And there are moments that are calling us all forward, even when it feels hard,
Mhm.
to show up in some way. And it's like having a conversation around like how can we be more empowered to having the courage to show up with the capacity that we do have
Mhm.
versus completely checking out and allowing that, helplessness, kind of victim mindset to take root.
Mhm.
Because I find so much of that is it's like a virus, like it's kind of like festered through,
Yeah.
and we've lost connection to recognizing like we are incredibly powerful and there are
Yes.
just small steps that we can take,
Mhm.
that can make an impact.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so yeah, I'd love to hear what your feelings
Yeah.
about that.
I think it's recognizing that like we can, to a degree, choose how we want to feel about things and how we want to think about things and how we want to respond to things. And there's a real power
Mhm.
in that. We can choose what actions we want to take. We can choose how and when we move towards something. We don't have to feel 100% of our emotions 100% of the time. It's learning, okay, I might have the capacity for 10% of my emotions today for an hour, and then I might need to back off. And learning that kind of push and pull towards and away from.
Mhm.
Um, Recognizing that when we choose peace, we are choosing power. And when we are choosing to honor our own nervous system, we're choosing to be more empowered just by doing that.
Yeah.
When we choose to, regulate our own nervous system, we're also regulating the nervous system of people around us. So just that
Mhm.
naturally is affecting the energy of the space around us.
Mhm.
Empaths have really big capacity to radiate love out. And so
Mhm.
instead of being in the fear state, which many empathic women tend to be because they're channeling what is being felt in the collective, doing the
Right.
reverse of that, connecting with your heart and radiating that out into the world, radiating that
Yeah.
out where it needs to go, radiating that to people who need to receive love in this moment and who are open to receiving it, and trusting that the universe will bring it to where it needs to go.
Mhm.
Those acts themselves are us being able to alter the collective and be a ripple in a positive way. That
Mhm.
alone can give us confidence and empower and help us remember that we are incredibly powerful beings. And the more we remember our power and step into that and collectively come together in that, the
Mhm.
quicker we're going to accelerate loving, compassionate change in the world. And we're going to see the kind of world that we want to live in that is going to be safe for all of us. It is very dark right now. There's a German proverb that I love. It's always darkest before the dawn.
Mhm.
And remembering that we are in this very, very dark time because collectively we are opening up to new possibilities, to new ways that we haven't been able to access before. We
Mhm.
are gaining more consciousness by the day, and it's rapidly shifting, but it's a
Yeah.
crumbling that has to happen first. And we're seeing a lot of the shadows of society really being shaken to the surface so that we can acknowledge them with open hearts and open minds and courage to move towards them with curiosity instead of so much judgment and division that we've seen for so many years. Being able to not let ourselves become victims to the others, to the patriarchy, to this group of people, to that group of people, but standing in our own power, in our own moments now of how we can light people up around us, how we can help people feel safe around us, how we can help people feel accepted exactly as they are.
Mm-hmm.
And, coming back to what you were, saying is like, we have this idea, especially with the patriarchy at times, that we have to show up like perfectly put together in order to like
Yeah.
do it right,
Mm-hmm.
and in order to like grieve right or feel right or be
Right.
activists in the right kind of way,
Right. Say the right thing.
say the right things,
Yeah.
right? Not be this kind of rescuer, that kind of this, all
Mm-hmm.
these different labels that ultimately just like
Yeah.
get in the way of us showing up.
Yeah.
And so doing it imperfectly and doing it when there's spelling errors and doing it when you're sobbing and you can't even make sense of what is being felt because you're feeling so many things in response to what's happening in the world.
Right.
And recognizing that that is what we actually need collectively. We need to feel this.
Yeah.
Part of the reason that we are in this collective like shithole is because we haven't been feeling. We've been oppressing and suppressing and repressing emotions for hundreds and hundreds of years and lineages and lifetimes.
Yes.
And this is them boiling to the surface to get people to feel, to shake people from their numb states and say, look
Yes.
at what is happening. At what point
Yes.
are we going to shift and
To
change
do.
and love?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I love how you said that peace is power. If every open moment that a thought crossed your mind that you wondered what you could do is just to ask yourself, like, what action towards peace, right, could I
Mm-hmm.
make right now? Is that like peace with yourself? Like, is there something that you can let go for yourself, a way to show up for yourself or for someone around you? Or,
Mm-hmm.
like, how can you walk that peace forward in the world? Because it really is how we discover our power.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I find too that it's if we are minded on the ways of which we are living in the heart of service, because that's really what it is to, I feel like, express love outwardly is actually through the ways that we serve.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I I think just taking a moment of like, if you feel helpless, you're like, what can I do? Like, just what is an act of kindness that you can do? Or
Mm-hmm.
what is something that's been calling on your heart in a way that you could serve someone? How
Mm-hmm.
could you just with your energy
Yep.
today, right? Or in the next hour, just be present, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's that way that we're contributing, that we
Mm-hmm.
feel like we are in contribution to what you were talking about vision earlier, Sarah, to the vision of what we actually want.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we don't get closer to a vision that we want by sitting idly by and doing nothing.
No, by taking action.
Resilience, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
resilience is like how we are walking towards the vision. Um, that brighter vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the courage that it really is to hold on to, like, that is what's possible in the midst of a sea of information and a world that is
Yeah.
communicating the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so thankful that we can have a space like this, Authentic Alchemy, that we can share with you, and
Yes.
build community in, to remind one another that, like, um, that vision is real and it's possible, and
Mm-hmm.
we can move towards it as
Mm-hmm.
we continue to show up and do this work for ourselves. But we have to have the courage to show up part first. And I don't know about you, Sarah, but it's, for me, it's really easy to hear a lot of these conversations where it's like a lot of blaming and finger pointing and,
Mhm.
like all these, ways that we need to fight back and everything. And all of that really gets in the way of what these moments are really calling us for, which is actually how we deepen into compassion and walk peace forward, how we
Yes.
actually do demonstrate love and we actually walk as the presence of love in the
Yes.
midst of that.
Yes.
And it's not to make any of that wrong, but it's
No.
to be louder than the voice of fear. Like, can we be
Yes.
louder than the voice of fear, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I truly walk in my life now in the world that I imagine for others. And walk as
Yes.
if that world is happening in here now and
Yep.
present. And in doing so, that's how we create that world more and more each
Yeah.
day, and how we bring it more and more into this reality each and every single day, knowing that we all
Mm-hmm.
have the power to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
As we close out, Sarah, because you're such a wonderful leader, around, just mindfulness,
Hmm.
like, um, if you would talk about, it's 3 minutes, at least 3 minutes a day, if you
Hmm.
can, just to regulate your own system and your own body.
Hmm.
And what are some methods that people can use, Sarah, to take with them to do some just getting regulated here,
Hmm.
to resource themselves,
Yeah.
especially with the things that we are going through right now?
Yeah. So it's a great question. It's really important for us to be able to resource ourselves.
Yeah.
Getting outside is a really important thing right now because we are feeling so many big emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Those emotions need space. And being inside with those emotions can leave us kind of boiling in them a little bit more, or staying in the same kind of position if you're often in your bed, or if you're often sitting in the same place in your on your couch or something like that in your living room. Getting up from those places and getting outside, getting some fresh air, getting in the sunshine right now, remembering the joys of life, remembering what does help you feel safe, and creating more safety in your life as much as you can. So, what kind of textures or clothes or objects might help you feel safe? What kind of people do you need to have around you in order to feel safe? And
Mm-hmm.
making sure that you're intentionally being in situations that you in your heart feel very safe in, and thinking about that and connecting consciously with, I choose to put myself in safe situations. I am safe, and connecting to that, placing a hand on your heart and your belly. Our belly is often a place that we hold a lot of fear and anxiety. A lot of our
Mm-hmm.
GI distress is related to that. So placing a
Mm-hmm.
hand on your belly and being able to connect to these two places. Taking slow breaths into the nose, blowing out slowly through the mouth as if we're blowing a kiss. And you want to do this breathing technique for at least a minute in order to really activate our relaxation response. Other techniques that you can do is humming, again, for more than a minute. Humming is going to activate our vagus nerve,
Mm-hmm.
which is our relaxation response, and cause us to relax. We want to recognize that, having capacity is also about like knowing when to be active and when we might need that, and knowing when we need to rest, and honoring both of those right now. And so just being able to be present with what is showing up. If it is, I need to be active, and maybe going for a run would help you blow off some steam and help you process some of the emotions that you're feeling, trust that. If it's, I'm feeling really drained and I'm feeling really heavy by what's happening, I think I just need to rest and watch something lighthearted, trust that.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
really trusting what you might be called in any given moment, and learning how to like tune in and listen to that body. And before we wrap up today, I also had two quotes that I wanted to share.
Yeah.
So when I'm in times of challenge, somebody that I like to turn to is Maya Angelou. And this is a book given to me by two friends, and this is the Pocket Maya Angelou Wisdom. And so I wanted to just share two quotes from this book that can help us when we are in challenging times to remember. We may encounter many defeats, but we must not be defeated, right? And
Mm,
this, I think, is, kind of such a beautiful definition of resilience is that even in the defeats that we're experiencing, if we can go on, we're never truly defeated. If we can
yeah,
learn, if we can grow, if we can be better, do better, individually, collectively, then we are not truly defeated in those moments. And it's not for nothing that there wasn't a loss in vain, that something good happened or came out of it, that there's still those possibilities that we can be stronger, have more grit, gain more self trust in these challenging situations. And then the next quote is, "My wish for you is that you continue. Continue to be who you are and how you are, to astonish a mean world with your acts of kindness. Continue to allow humor to lighten the burden of your tender heart."
mm,
Such an important
yeah,
message for us right now that our hearts may be very tender, having experienced all that we have again and again and again and again, right? But we can still continue and meet that mean world with kindness, as we've spoken about tonight.
yeah. Thank you, Sarah.
Mm-hmm. So
Thanks for
just know
joining
that
us,
we,
everyone.
yeah, we hold all of you in so much love, each of you
Yeah.
who joined us, and each
Mhm.
other and the whole world who is hurting right now. We just really acknowledge that hurt, and we acknowledge you for
Mhm.
showing up in whatever capacity you have each day.
Mhm.
Know
It's
that it is
hard,
enough. Yeah. Go ahead,
and
Sarah.
carry courage. Carry courage. Yep. It's your divine right, that courage. It's the power that wields your entire existence. So,
Yes.
yeah, use it,
Yes.
resource it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mm,
Turning any heavy emotions over to the divine too.
yeah.
A beautiful practice that I use with my clients is really imagining pouring these emotions into a cup, filling that cup up with all of those heavy, intense, dense emotions, and then walking that cup outside and pouring it in the grass, or pouring it in water, pouring it in the ocean, walking into the ocean and pouring it into the ocean. Whatever visual might be really powerful and juicy for you, trust that.
Mhm.
But handing it over and surrendering it to the divine and knowing that you don't have to carry it within you when it's really heavy.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Thank
Thank you so much for
you.
joining, and everybody have a beautiful night.
Bye.